Hello students. The story we are going to discuss today is The Portrait of a Lady by Kushwant Singh. Let's discuss the title's significance. A portrait is a hand-drawn picture of a person. The portrait here refers to the exhaustively descriptive pen picture of his grandmother the author has depicted. Kushwant Singh. Kushwant Singh was an author, lawyer, diplomat, politician, columnist, and journalist. His notable works include Train to Pakistan, Truth, Love, and a Little Malice, which is his autobiography, and many more that this slide cannot contain. He has won a number of awards and recognitions such as Rockefeller Grant, Padma Bhushan and Padma Vibhushan by the Government of India, Punjab Ratan Award, Sahitya Academy Fellowship, All India Minorities Forum Annual Fellowship Award, Lifetime Achievement Award by Tata Literature Live at the Mumbai Life Fest, and so on. He was also a Fellow of King's College London. The story contains an autobiographical element. Autobiography is an account of an individual's life recounted by the person himself. Kushwant Singh travels down the memory lane and writes vividly about his grandmother. It revolves around his subtle remembrance about his granny from the author's childhood to the grandmother's death. It gives us a feeling of traveling along with the author and the grandmother. The story involves three phases of the author's life. The first phase of the relationship between the author and the grandson was when the grandson was still in his primary years of schooling, living with his grandmother in his ancestral village. The second phase deals with the duo shifting to the city to live with the family. Phase 3 deals with the authors going to the university till the granny's death. Phase 1 deals with the author's boyhood in his native village. As a boy, in his early childhood, the author was left with his granny until his parents settled down in the city comfortably. They were inseparable and their days started and ended together. No day was different from the other. They used to get up together. The grandmother would do literally everything connected to the grandson. She would bathe him and dress him even. She used to plaster his slate with yellow chalk and keep it ready with an ink pot to be carried to the school. The grandson would be fed with a thick stale chapati with a layer of butter and sugar on it. The grandson's school was attached to a gurudwara where the grandson would learn his alphabet and morning prayer, while the grandmother would read her scriptures until the grandson finished. Grandmother used to carry stale chapatis for the village dogs. Here, I would like to give you some information regarding Indian places of worship and their significance in our educational scenario. Indian places of worship hosted schools ever since the 4th century BC. They were known as Gatikas or Madas. The students were taught scriptures there. In the 9th century, Vedic schools were attached to the Hindu temples. They provided free stay and food for the students and scholars. There were also discourses, debates, competitions, and recitals. In short, these schools provided a space for community interactions. These schools strengthened the basic learning skills of the general village folk at a later point of time. The one you see in the background was one of the schools attached to a gurudwara. Let's now discuss the usage of the definite article the. The definite article the is omitted when you refer to places of visit on primary purpose. Here, the grandson visited the Gurudwara not for praying but to attend a school attached to it. Similarly, the grandmother visited the school not for learning anything but to pray in the Gurudwara attached to it. The primary purpose of visiting school is to learn. When one uses it in that sense, it is referred to just as school and not as the school. For example, you come to school to learn. Notice the omission of the definite article here. Whereas your parents visit the school to meet your teachers. Notice the inclusion of the. The school here is only a structure when you visit there for any other purpose other than teaching or learning. The phase 2 of the relationship commenced when the duo shifted to the city. The boy's parents called for them to their city home when they were settled comfortably there. The boy and the granny were given the same room in their city home too. Their interaction time was reduced to a very great extent. The granny ceased to be the boy's constant companion thereon, as he started going to a city school all day long. Now let's see, what opinion did Granny hold of the city schools? The grandson went to an English school in a motor bus. Unlike the village school where he learned scriptures, the boy started learning English, science and music. According to the grandmother, education without any teachings about God was no education at all. Also, dance and music was not for the gentlefolk, but meant for the harlots and people with lowly interests, according to the grandmother. Despite having a severe dislike for city education, the granny would keep mum. The grandson was grooming into a city lad, and that's when the grandmother and the grandson were drifting apart. Though the grandmother and the grandson were together in the same room, the ideological differences between them were growing widely. The grandmother became solitary and drawn inward. The grandmother was taken more to spinning of the wheel, telling the beads in prayer, and feeding the sparrows. You know how the grandmother spent her time in her city home? She was constantly taken to telling of the beads of the rosary, spinning the charka, and feeding the sparrows. And a time came when the grandson had to leave for a university. This was phase 3 of their relationship. When the grandson went on to study in a university, he was given a different room. The only common link, being in the same room, was even snapped. The granny became more and more secluded. She was constantly taken to spinning wheel all the time. She relaxed a little in the afternoon, only to feed the sparrows. The granny's connection with the sparrows was a real epic one in the story. She relaxed a little from spinning the wheel, only to feed the sparrows. She developed a close bonding with the sparrows. There would be a veritable bedlam of chirruping around her when she would be feeding them. The sparrows would be perched over everywhere, her shoulders, head, and feet. She would never shoo them away. She would even chide them playfully. The time she spent with the sparrows, about half an hour, was the happiest time of her day. The grandson traveled abroad for further studies after he finished his university degree. He was supposed to stay abroad for about 5 years. The grandmother did not show any reaction when the grandson left for his journey abroad. She was not even sentimental. She only held him tight and kissed him on his forehead. The author would cherish later the moistness of a kiss on his forehead. He would only be worried whether he would be able to see his grandmother alive when he would return home after 5 years. It was time for the grandson to come home. The grandmother would meet him at the railway station when the grandson returned home after 5 years of study. She had not changed a bit, neither in appearance nor in habits. She would continue to tell the beads with her lips moving in inaudible prayer. She would spin the charka all day. She had been feeding sparrows even then with the same zest. Something really strange happened that day. The very evening of the grandson's arrival, the grandmother behaved in an uncharacteristic fashion. She collected the women of the locality and started singing the songs of warriors coming home. She went on thumping a dilapidated drum and sang all the evening. That was the only day she did not really pray. She took ill the same evening. The granny knew in her heart of hearts that her end was near. She lay peacefully on the bed and continued telling the beads even when everyone asked her to rest. Before everyone could even realize, the rosary fell down from her hand, pronouncing her death. Let's see how the sparrows paid their tribute to the grandmother. When the granny was lying dead in her bedroom, a large number of sparrows got collected around her corpse, which was covered with a red shroud. They did not chirrup. They sat around her body as if mourning and did not pay heed to the breadcrumbs thrown by the author's mother. When the corpse was being carried, they flew away silently. Here are some very important points to ponder. I want you to think about the following things carefully. The story presents an enduring picture of the grandmother, describing her physical appearance and mental makeup. The relationship between the duo was changing from time to time. There are a number of valuable insights about how the concept of education has undergone a sea change. The grandmother's nature of silent grit and non-interference was indeed a commendable one. Though she had no words for humans, she had devoted all her time for the god and animals. The animals too showed single-minded loyalty and enthusiasm towards her. The lovely homage paid by the sparrows is equally noteworthy. It is such a rare quality that they paid back all the love she showed them in a very unique way. The lesson is indeed a portrait of words and a grandson's tribute to the grandmother.